this is kind of what brought me to this topic of the Antichrist. So let me give you a couple thoughts on this, right? So the first thing you see here is the Catholic Church catches the beast. I don't even know how that's possible, but the Catholic Church is the one behind having the beast. It's a small fringe group of the Catholic Church. So it's like that a cult within the Catholic Church is kind of doing these things. Now, let me tell you my thoughts on this. So firstly, the beast. The beast is coming out in Revelation chapter 13, right? So we're not going to get into that. We're not going to go to that verse yet. But in Revelation chapter 13, it talks about two beasts. One that comes out of the ocean, one that comes from the earth, okay? And first thing I want to say is, let's take a look at, I feel like I'm doing like a Bible study. All right, everyone, let's open our Bibles to Hosea chapter 12, verse 10. And we're going to take a look at the Bible verse, what God says to the prophet Hosea, right? Okay, I'm not going to do that, but, you don't have to open your Bibles because I'm going to show it to you right now. So in Hosea chapter 12, verse 10, very, very good verse. It says that, I spoke to the prophets, gave them many visions, and told parables through them, okay? So one of the things we see here is God is telling like, hey, when I give dreams, when I give visions to these prophets, I'm telling you parables. I'm telling you things symbolic through them. And we do know that the entire book of Revelation is this vision, this revelation that Apostle John was given on the island of Patmos. And he's receiving this, and I would say I think when you look at Hosea chapter 12, verse 10, through this vision, there's a lot of symbolism and imagery in this that is for us to understand. It's not a literal thing. So that's my first thought. I think another verse that you can read, like some people say to me, like, does the New Testament do that? And I would say Jesus did the same thing. If you look at Matthew 13, 34 and 35, what does Jesus say? Jesus spoke all things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. And verse 35 is the key. He's like, because I have to fulfill the prophecy that's in the book of Psalms that says, I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world, right? So when we look at this, we're like, okay. So the first thing that's my first thought is, if you look at the book of Revelation about the beast, it's really interesting because we have to look at the book of Revelation more in symbolism and parables. And I'm not saying I know exactly what that beast is, but we do need to know is that we can't just look at it and say, oh, there's a dragon beast that mates with a woman and then sleeps with his daughter and then has the Antichrist. Like, this is something where I'm like, I think it's something that it seems way too Hollywood, okay? Now, the second thing I want to talk about is the Antichrist. And this is kind of what the topic we're looking at right now. And the Antichrist is, I think it's very misunderstood in the Bible because there's like several different parts in the Bible that do talk, or people say it talks about the Antichrist. But when you look at it, I think they're talking about three separate and different things, okay? So the first verse, we're going to take a look at Apostle John, because Apostle John was the one that brought up Revelation chapter 13, right? He's the one that received the visions to write the book of Revelation. But Apostle John also has the three epistles, right? 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. So let's take a look at 1 John chapter 2, verse 22. And this is where John brings up this first, occurrence of the Antichrist. And what it says in 1 John 2:22, it says, who is the liar? It is whoever denies that Jesus is the Christ. Such a person is the Antichrist, denying the Father and the Son. So we get a definition from John. What Antichrist, what does it mean? Antichrist is anyone who denies Jesus, which makes sense because anti means against, Christ, which is Jesus Christ. Anyone who's against Jesus Christ is the Antichrist. Anyone who denies is the Antichrist. So this can mean multiple people, not just a singular person, okay? Which leads us to the next verse in 1 John chapter 4, verse 3. Once again, we go into the Antichrist. It says, every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. This is the, spirit of the Antichrist. It's not a human, spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming and even now is already in the world, which this was written 2,000 years ago. So what Apostle John is saying is, guess what, guys? we're not looking at just a singular being. We're talking about the spirit of the Antichrist, the spirit of the one who denies that Jesus is Christ, denies Jesus and God. And guess what? You think he's coming? Like you heard he's coming. He's already here. And that was 2,000 years ago, right? So when we look at this, we're like, I think we know who he's talking about. This Antichrist, the one that denies Jesus, who is the one that is against Jesus? It's Satan. And Satan's a spirit. The spirit of the Antichrist working in people to come against Christ. This is Satan. So when you look at this, John is actually telling us anyone, not a singular person, multiple people, anyone who denies Jesus is the Antichrist. But even underneath that person is the spirit of the Antichrist, the one that has been denying since the very beginning, which is Satan. And that's why we already know this? Satan is the one that tempts us away from Christ. Satan is the one that wants us to deny Christ. Satan wins when we don't come to God. We already know this. And what John is telling us is, that's the spirit of the Antichrist. There is a spirit that's already here. It's already been here this entire time. It's Satan. It's been there since the beginning from Adam and Eve, the one that tempts away from God. This next verse is 1 John chapter 2, verse 18. And this is also a very, very good verse. And look what it says. Dear children, this is the last hour, right? The end times. And as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now, many Antichrists have come. This is how we know it's the last hour. What does it say? Not a singular. Many have come. Many have come. Even from 2,000 years ago, people who deny Christ. Even today, are there Antichrists? Absolutely, because there is a spirit in this world that is making people deny, tempting people away from Jesus. The spirit of the Antichrist. So this is the first thing I want us to understand about the Antichrist. What is talking directly about the Antichrist? That's the first thing is, these are things talking directly about the Antichrist. The other verses that we reference, like, is there a one Antichrist? That reference would be like 2 Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And this entire chapter Paul is talking about the man of lawlessness, right? The man of lawlessness. And in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, I didn't actually prepare this one, but in verse 7, it says that this man of lawlessness, and this is 2,000 years ago, remember, his power is already at work. So when you think of the man of lawlessness, but the power has already been at work from 2,000 years ago, if we take that literally, it means that man of lawlessness has been alive for 2,000 years. Like, well, what does this mean? Like, who is this man of lawlessness? It doesn't say specifically he's the Antichrist, but a lot of people are assuming that maybe this man of lawlessness is the Antichrist. I'm bringing up these verses for you kind of shift your perspective on, is this really talking about the Antichrist? Is it really about this or not? And it's not as simple as we think, where, you'll get these movies and these Hollywood movies that are going to kind of put fear into people of faith. Like, oh my goodness, there is the man of lawlessness. And people are going to start saying stuff like, oh, it's Donald Trump. Oh, it's Hamas, or, oh, it's Iran, the leader of Iran, or this or that. It's like, people are all of a sudden just kind of spitting these words out here and there. And it kind of brings this fear and like pandemonia amongst believers. Like, oh my gosh, solar eclipse. Is it the rapture? And the answer is, we get solar eclipses every year. It happens every year. And we're freaking out even more from these things. Guys, Revelation is very, very symbolic. Very symbolic. Like in Revelation chapter 13, verse 11. What does it say? It says like, oh, there's a second beast coming out of the earth, 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. How does a dragon speak? Spoke like a dragon? Like, what does a dragon speak like? It's very symbolic. It's very hidden meanings inside these things. And if I were to give you like Another example of a beast that's more explained, like the parable is literally explained, is Daniel chapter 7. When you look at Daniel chapter 7, verse 19 and 20, very, very interesting because Daniel too has a vision. And like Hosea said, God gives visions and gives parables or symbolism through it. And guess what Daniel sees? In Daniel 7, 19, 20, he sees a beast. I want to know the meaning of the fourth beast. Different from all the others, most terrifying, iron teeth, bronze claws, crushed and devoured its victims, trampled underfoot whatever was left. And then what's on top of the beast's head? Verse 20. I also want to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell. The horn that looked more imposing than the others, that had eyes and a mouth, that spoke boastfully. Ah! But guess what? 4 verses later, it gives you the answer. 4 verses later, right? What does it say? Daniel chapter 7, verse 24. It gives you the answer of what this beast is. The 10 horns are symbolizing 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue the 3 kings, which means it's not talking about a literal beast with 10 horns, but you see this beast and the horns are symbolizing, this beast is symbolizing 10 kings. So when you look at the Bible, there's a lot of things that we see. It's like, wait a second, is it really talking about like a beast, a dragon, look 2 horns, like a goat, speaks like a dragon, or what did it say in Revelation 13:11? 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. And these are the things I do think we have to look at. And when you understand what all these verses I gave you right now, you're going to get down to, wait, so you're not saying that the beast is this dragon-looking being that mates with a woman, has a child, sleeps with his daughter, and then has a son, and that son is the Antichrist. Like, you got to think about this. And I think because we're not carefully looking at these verses, and I'm not saying that, oh, it's exactly this or it's exactly this. What I'm telling you guys right now is when we start to look carefully at them, we have to be able to say, reasonably speaking, or when I look at the Bible and how the Bible interprets itself, this could actually, most likely is going to be something else. It most likely is going to be something else. Spirit of the Antichrist, guys. Spirit of the Antichrist. Who is the spirit that denies Jesus? It's Satan. What is Satan doing to everyone in the world? Trying to tempt us, trying to tempt believers to do what? To get away from Christ. The spirit of the Antichrist. And that's what John talked about. We read those 3 verses in 1 John. That's what John talked about. Like, he specifically talked about the Antichrist is this. And that's why I'm bringing this up to you guys is I don't want people to get too freaked out by these Hollywood things. And I put in the link. I don't know if there's a link, but I posted in the description below. I do have a video I made before on the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast. And of course, the video is back then at that time, people were saying the vaccines, the COVID vaccines were the mark of the beast. So it is talking about the vaccines too, but it's mainly about the mark of the beast. So guys, go ahead, check in the description below, and you will see that there's going to be a video on the mark of the beast. And I will post that what was the other video I was talking about again? I said there's another video that you should watch. No. What? Oh, Jacob wrestling with God. That's like the most popular one right now. Like the short is like 20,000 views right now. But it's like, there's a full video on it. I don't understand why people can comment on just a 50-second clip, but they won't watch the full video that I made to get the proper understanding of what I really meant. But I'll put that description in the post below too, right? So Jacob wrestling with God, what does it actually mean? All right. So that is something that I thought would be very, very interesting for a lot of us to look at. Right. I think it's something that we should. I do think these are good topics, especially for those that already know like the foundation of faith. Of course, for people who are just learning, I think you should learn the gospel. If you're new to this, new to God, you should learn the gospel and such. But when it comes to those, how many times have you guys heard that Jesus died on the cross and rose again, and he died for your sins, and now we're saved because of that? We've heard that so many times that a lot of times we do want to get into deeper things. Yes, it's not going to affect our faith as in like, oh, I'm leaving because I don't know what the mark of the beast is. It's more of, it brings us deeper into the scriptures, and it allows us to kind of get bigger insight of who this God is, what kind of God we're believing in such too. All right. So yeah, that is the big thing I want to talk about today, which was the Antichrist. And I hope that, I know there's going to be some jokes in there, or maybe not even jokes. I think some people are going to really comment about this video and say, you're the Antichrist, Pastor Sky.